be getting the variation of current and voltage graph with various factors. Previously we have seen how current and voltage varies, the collector voltage versus plate current graph. We have seen something like this. This is the saturation current Is, this is the stopping potential minus Vs, this is 0. This much we have seen in the previous class. Now, what are the factors which we can change in the experiment of phototube? Let us see what are the quantities which we can change. We have seen the diagram of phototube. There we have current I as photons are incident on it. Energy of each photon is h nu. Electrons are emitted from the plate. Their kinetic energy is k. And the kinetic energy of emitted electron varies between 0 to h nu minus phi, and where maximum kinetic energy is equal to h nu minus phi. We have also seen the stopping potential Vs to be equal to hc by E into 1 by lambda minus 1 by lambda Th. So, these are the equations which we have already seen. Now, we need to find what are the factors on which this graph can change. Now, if I change the frequency of incident light, if I change the frequency, if I change frequency nu, we have already seen K max is equal to EVS. So, if I change frequency, stopping potential changes. Let me rewrite the equation. Vs is equal to h by E nu minus phi by E. So, with change in frequency, stopping potential changes. So, if I increase the frequency of incident photons, so first case we are considering frequency of incident photons is being increased. So, what will happen? If I increase frequency, kinetic energy, maximum kinetic energy of emitted electron will increase. As maximum kinetic energy will increase, stopping magnitude of stopping potential will also increase. So, with increasing frequency, we can see that this implies increase in K max, this implies increase in stopping potential. And we have also said that collector potential is negative of stopping potential. So, if we increase the frequency of light, collector potential becomes more negative. But if we do not change the number of incident photons, if number of incident photons falling per unit time is kept constant, if photons are kept constant, the number of electrons emitted per unit time, that also remains constant. So, as n is equal to constant, this implies n by T is equal to constant. This implies current to be constant, the saturation current Is to be constant. So, saturation current remains constant. If I increase the frequency, then stopping potential will increase or collector potential will become more negative. So, the variation in graph will be like this. This is minus Vs dash. If this is the graph for frequency nu, this is the graph for frequency nu dash, as we can see, the magnitude Vs dash is greater than Vs. This implies nu dash to be greater than nu. So, what does it mean? If I increase the frequency of incident light, stopping potential increases or collector potential becomes more negative. So, as frequency increases, stopping potential becomes more negative. Okay. This is the variation with frequency. This is the first case. Now the second one. If I change the rate of incidence of photons, if I increase n, then what will happen? Now the second case. Second case is n is increased and nu is equal to constant. Frequency is kept constant and rate of incidence of photons is being increased. So as frequency is constant, this implies stopping potential to be constant. But as rate of incidence of photon increases, as n increases, this implies a rate of incidence of photons to be increased. As the rate of incidence of photons is increased, rate of emission of electron is also increased, and as rate of emission of electron is increased, this implies the saturation current to be increased. So if I plot the variation of saturation current with a rate of incidence of photons, then we can write, if I plot the graph for two different rate of incidence of photons, suppose this is the saturation current, collector potential 0 minus Vs. Let this is the saturation current I1, this is the saturation current I2. This saturation current is for dN by dt rate of incidence of photons. This saturation current is because of dN2 by dt of photons. So from the graph we can see that as I2 is greater than I1, this implies dN2 by dt to be greater than dN1 by dt. So we have seen that there are two factors which could change the current. One is frequency of incident light and other is a rate of incidence of photons. So higher the rate of incidence of photon, higher is the saturation current, higher is the frequency of incident light, higher is the stopping potential. So these are the two factors which can change the current versus voltage graph. Now let us see a question. We have three identical phototubes, that is work function for all three tubes is same, the plate is same. The tubes are named A, B and C. These are the three tubes. The stopping potentials are minus V1 and minus V2. The saturation currents are I1 and I2. So there are three identical phototubes having same work function. Their current versus voltage graphs are given. Now you need to find the relation between the frequencies of incident photons, that is nu A, nu B and nu C, how they are related, and we need to find the rate of incidence of photons in all three tubes, dNA by dt, dNB by dt and dNC by dt, how they are related. So what is the relation between frequency of light incident on the tubes, and what is the relation among the rate of incidence of photons falling on the tube. So this is the question. So now how to solve this particular question? Let us first think of frequencies. For B and C, the stopping potential is same. It is V2, or collector potential is minus V2. So B and C has same stopping potential. It means their frequencies are same. So nu B is equal to nu C. So frequency of incident light falling on B and C are equal. Now stopping potential for A is less. The magnitude V2 is greater than the magnitude V1. So V1 is less. As stopping potential is less, frequency of A is less. So the relation between frequencies, nu A is less than nu B and nu B is equal to nu C. That's the relation among frequencies. Now let us think of the rate of incidence of photons. We can see for A and B saturation current is same. As saturation current for these two are same, the rate of incidence of photons on these two are equal. That is dNA by dt is equal to dNB by dt. Now you could see that saturation current for C is greater. I2 is greater than I1. So as I2 is greater, the rate of incidence of photon is also greater. So dNC by dt is greater than the other two. So this is the relation among the frequencies and rate of incidence of photons. Now as we got the rate of incidence of photons, we define another term for rate of incidence of photon. We frequently use the term intensity. So what is intensity? Let us first define intensity, then we can find how they are related with frequency. So intensity is denoted by I. What is intensity? It is the amount of energy falling normally per unit area per unit time. That is, amount of energy falling per unit area per unit time. This is the intensity. And energy is carried by photons. One photon is carrying energy equal to h nu. So n number of photons carry a total energy of nh nu. So energy carried by photons is nh nu by at. So here from we can write number of photons falling per unit time n by t is equal to Ia by h nu. Generally when we talk about intensity, we consider frequency to be constant. So for a particular plate, surface area is constant, Planck constant is already there. If frequency is also constant, this is the rate of incidence of photon which is proportional to intensity of light. So n by t is proportional to intensity of light. Previously we have seen that the saturation current is dN by dt, that is nothing but n by t, that is the rate of incidence of photons. So here from we can also write saturation current is proportional to intensity of light. That means higher the intensity, higher is the saturation current. Generally when we talk of intensity, we say it is the rate of incidence of photons. Means higher the rate of incidence of photons, higher is the intensity. So saturation current is proportional to intensity of light. So if I ask how intensities are related here, so here from I can write intensity of light falling on A is equal to intensity of light falling on B, and that is less than intensity of light falling on C. So in terms of intensity, the previous question could be related in this particular form. that intensity on A and B are equal and intensity on C is greater than that on A and B. Now let us see another question. The question is, the plate of a phototube is placed at a distance of 6 meter from a point source of light. This is a point source of light and the plate of the phototube is at a distance of 6 meter. In this situation, the stopping potential is found to be 2 volt and saturation current is found to be 4 milliampere. So it is the previous situation. If distance of the source is now doubled, that means if I take the source here at P dash, then what will be the stopping potential and what will be the saturation current? So what is the question? The question is, plate of a phototube is initially at a distance of 6 meter from a point source of light such that stopping potential and saturation currents are 2 volt and 4 milliampere respectively. The distance of the source is now doubled. That is, initially it was 6 meter, it is moved by another 6 meter, and distance is now doubled, that is 12 meter. Then what will be the stopping potential and saturation current? So in the first case, let us see the formula for stopping potential. Stopping potential is H by E into nu minus nu Th. With change in distance, frequency do not change. As frequency do not change, stopping potential do not change. So here from we can write Vs dash is equal to Vs is equal to 2 volt. Stopping potential remains same. Now what about saturation current? For point source of light, intensity is proportional to R1 upon R to the power minus 2. Intensity is inversely proportional to square of distance, and so is saturation current. Now the saturation current Is dash upon Is is equal to R initial square by R final square, that is 12 square by 6 square, it is 6 square by 12 square, that is equal to 1 by 4. So Is dash is Is upon 4, that is 4 milliampere by 4 or 1 milliampere. So now saturation current becomes 1 milliampere, stopping potential remains 2 volt, while saturation current becomes 1 milliampere. Now as I said in the beginning that Einstein got Nobel Prize for explaining this particular phenomena, photoelectric effect. Now why Einstein got Nobel Prize for this? Because before this light was assumed to be a wave, but Einstein proved this phenomena assuming light to be particle, that is photon. This phenomena, photoelectric effect, is the proof of particle nature of light, as this phenomena can be explained by particle nature only but not by the wave nature. How particle nature could explain? There are 3 distinct differences between wave nature and particle nature. First of all, we need to know about the time delay problem. If light behaves as a wave, then there is a continuous flow of energy. As there is continuous flow of energy, the electron present in the material could gain the energy and come out with some time delay. That means as electron requires some energy phi, this amount of energy, minimum amount of energy is needed. How this energy will be coming? This energy will be coming because of continuous flow of light, that is I into A into T. As we have seen, I is equal to E by AT. So energy needed, that phi will be equal to IAT. If I keep on decreasing intensity of light, the time should keep on increasing. So if I use light of low intensity, the electron will take sufficient time to come out. But electron will come out, definitely come out, whatever be the time delay, it should come out. But experimentally it was found that the phenomena is instantaneous. That means as long as photon is striking, the electron comes out without any time delay. It is possible only when electron gains the total energy at a moment and jumps out. This also explains one more thing, that if light is like a wave, all the electrons should come out with zero kinetic energy. Because with continuous flow of energy, electron starts gaining kinetic energy and they will come out with zero kinetic energy. So there should be no different kinetic energies of emitted electrons. They should all have same kinetic energy. There should not be any concept of stopping potential. But it is found that electrons of different kinetic energies are emitted. It is possible only when the electron absorbs the entire energy as a packet. If the packet of energy is more, energy of emitted electron will also be more. So that we have seen that K max depends upon K max is equal to h nu minus phi. If this h nu is higher, electron will have higher kinetic energy. So there is a problem of time delay which could not be explained by wave nature, as according to wave nature the process cannot be instantaneous. Now the second one, that is the intensity problem. What is intensity problem? As we could see that if we increase the intensity, time taken will be less, so the electron could come out at lesser time. With higher intensity, the number of electrons should not change, only the time should change. But it is found that with increase in intensity, saturation current increases. That is, rate of incidence of photons increases, photoelectrons increases. How it can be explained? More intensity means more number of photons. As more number of photons are falling on it, more electrons will be emitted. As number of electrons increases, current increases. So the dependence of saturation current on intensity, this can be explained only by photon or particle nature of light and not by wave nature. So this is the intensity problem. Third one is the frequency problem. As we said earlier that when frequency of incident light is greater than equal to threshold frequency, then only photoelectric effect takes place. Otherwise photoelectric effect do not take place. Why so? If light is like a wave, if wave is falling, whatever low be the frequency, it doesn't matter, the electron will take more time to come out. But it is found that if frequency is less than threshold frequency, no electron comes out at any time. Whatever be the time taken, they do not come out. They come out only when the frequency is greater than equal to threshold frequency. What does it mean? If the packet of energy is sufficient, electrons gain energy at one go, sufficient energy, and then only it can come out. So all these problems, the time delay, intensity and frequency, these three problems can be explained only by particle nature and not by wave nature. So this was a new idea, a revolutionary idea, considering that which is known as dual nature of light. Light has wave nature as well as particle nature. And this phenomena, photoelectric effect, proves the particle nature of light. Now as I said that photon has particle nature, so along with particle nature it could have some particle properties also. Let us see, let us understand one more term, that is called radiation pressure. What is radiation pressure? Radiation pressure is that when light is incident on a surface, it hits the surface and surface experiences a force, and that normal force per unit area exerts a pressure. As you might have seen that the tail of a comet is always directed away from sun. How and why? The dust and gas particles present in the comet, in the tail of the comet, experiences a force exerted by sunlight. So sunlight exerts a force on the tail, and that is why tail of a comet is always directed away from sun. The length of the tail also changes. When the comet is close to sun, the tail is longer, and when the comet is away from sun, the tail is shorter. Why length also changes? When the tail is the comet is closer to sun, the tail experiences more force as intensity of sunlight is more. As it experiences more force, the elongation in the tail is more. And when the comet is at large distance, its elongation is lesser as it experiences lesser force. But why it experiences a force? Let us first understand the momentum of photon. Momentum of photon, that is equal to mass of the photon into speed of photon. Now what is mass of photon? Photon is a particle having zero rest mass. That is, when photon is at rest, it do not have any mass. But it is not the case when photon is in motion. Photon is a packet of energy, and according to Einstein's mass energy relation, energy is equal to m into c square. So effective mass of photon is E by c square. So if I use this mass here, it is E by c square into c, or momentum of photon is equal to E by c. Energy of photon by speed of light is the momentum of photon. And as according to Planck's hypothesis, we have seen E is equal to h nu, so it is h nu by c. And as you already know, speed is equal to frequency into wavelength. So here from we can also write momentum of photon is equal to h by lambda. So momentum of photon is either E by c, energy by speed of light, or h by lambda, that is the momentum of photon. So when photon strikes a surface, it may rebound from the surface, its momentum will change, and you know the rate of change of momentum is force, and normal force per unit area is pressure. So when radiation strikes a surface, the surface experiences a pressure. We need to know when the incidence is normal, what is the pressure at that moment. Now we define another term. Suppose we have a surface, and I define a term that is rho, that is called coefficient of reflection. What is coefficient of reflection? It is the ratio of incident energy to reflected energy. That is, ratio of reflected energy to incident energy is called coefficient of reflection. If the surface is perfectly reflecting, For perfectly reflecting surface, ER is equal to EI. In that situation, rho will become 1 for perfectly reflecting surface. If the surface is perfectly absorbing, that is whatever energy is incident, there is no reflection, reflected energy is 0. In that situation, rho will be 0. So rho lies between 0 to 1. Rho is equal to 0 for perfectly absorbing surface. And rho is equal to 1 for perfectly reflecting surface. So this is the coefficient of reflection. So here from we got two terms. One momentum of photon is E by C and coefficient of reflection is reflected energy by incident energy. Now using this, we need to find the radiation pressure. We will be finding radiation pressure in two cases. First case we will be considering for normal incidence. So first case we are considering normal incidence. So we consider a surface on which a parallel beam of light is incident normally. I is the intensity of light, and as it is incident normally, it also gets reflected normally. Let me say incident energy is E and reflected energy ER can be written as rho into E. So the momentum of incident light, Pi, let me write, momentum of incident light, Pi is equal to E by C. E is nothing but, energy is nothing but intensity into area into time by C, IAT by C. As we consider this direction to be x-axis, so in vector form we can write incident momentum EI cap by C or IAT by C. This is the incident momentum. For reflected light, PR is equal to ER by C into minus I cap. ER is nothing but rho E by C into minus I cap, that is equal to minus rho IAT by C into I cap. This is the momentum of reflected light. Change in momentum delta P, P reflected minus P incident. This is equal to minus rho IAT by C I cap minus IAT by C I cap, or we can write minus 1 plus rho IAT by C I cap. This is the change in momentum of light. So what is the force experienced by light? FL is equal to a rate of change of momentum dP by dt, or that is equal to, if I take in t time it happened, so it can be written as minus 1 plus rho IA by C I cap. Now, according to Newton's third law, light and the surface will experience equal and opposite force. So force experienced by the surface is equal to minus of force experienced by light. So here from we can write 1 plus rho IA by C I cap. This is the force experienced by the surface, and the force is normal to the surface. So pressure is magnitude of normal force per unit area. This is the pressure PR. So pressure is equal to 1 plus rho I by C. This is the pressure experienced by the surface when light is incident normally on that surface. So pressure is equal to 1 plus rho I by C. If a surface is perfectly reflecting, rho is equal to 1, so maximum pressure is 2I by C. And if the surface is perfectly absorbing, then the pressure is, rho is 0, then the pressure is I by C. So the pressure varies between I by C to 2I by C depending upon the coefficient of reflection of the surface. Okay. Now, let us get a question. What is the question? A perfectly reflecting small square mirror of mass m, sides A, and perfectly reflecting means rho is equal to 1, is hanging from ceiling. Length of the thread is L. A parallel beam of light in horizontal direction having intensity I is incident normally on the surface of the mirror. You need to find the angular deflection of the string at equilibrium. So the question is, a small square perfectly reflecting plane mirror is hanging with the help of a string from ceiling. If horizontal beam of parallel light of intensity I is falling normally on the surface of the mirror, find angle made by the string with vertical at equilibrium. So what happens? Let us see. Due to the incident light, the surface is a force and gets deflected, and the string becomes like this. And this is the incident light. Let theta is the angle made by the string with vertical. So what are the forces acting on the mirror? One is weight of the mirror, mg, vertically downward. Due to incident light, there is a pressure as the mirror is perfectly reflecting, 2I by C. So if pressure is 2I by C, what is the force? That is pressure into area. Because of the incident light, there is a force, how much? 2I A square by C. For square mirror of side A, area is A square. So 2I A square by C. There is a tension T in the string, and let angle made with vertical is theta, which we need to find. And the mirror is at equilibrium in this situation. For equilibrium, the horizontal and vertical forces must balance. If I write the horizontal force, because of tension, the horizontal component is T sin theta, that is 2I A square by C. The vertical component of tension is T cos theta, which balances the weight mg. So dividing this, we have tan theta is equal to 2I A square by C mg, or theta at equilibrium is tan inverse 2I A square by C mg. This is the angular deflection of string at equilibrium. It is tan inverse 2I A square by C mg. So this we got when the radiation is striking normally on the surface. Now what happens when the incidence is not normal? Light is incident at some angle. And the second case, it is oblique incidence. When incidence is not normal, then what happens? Let us see. We have a surface of area A, coefficient of reflection rho. A parallel beam of light is incident on the mirror, making an angle theta. So it will be getting reflected with the same angle. So it is getting reflected at angle theta. If the intensity of light is high, then the amount of energy falling on the mirror we can have. As the energy is not falling normally, we need to find energy, and to find energy we need to get the normal area, the projected area. As this angle is theta, this is 90 minus theta, this is 90, so this angle is also theta. So this projected area, normal to incident light, is A cos theta. So here from we can write incident energy EI is equal to I A cos theta into T. This is the incident energy. The reflected energy is rho EI, that is we can write rho I A cos theta into T. This is the reflected energy. Because of incident light, there is a momentum in the direction of incident light. That momentum is Pi. That is how much? That is E by C. That is I A cos theta T by C. This is the momentum due to incident light, the change in momentum of the mirror. As the reflected light comes in this direction, this exerts a force in opposite direction to the reflected light. So there is a reflected momentum. PR is equal to rho I A T I A cos theta T by C. This is the momentum due to reflected light. These momentum gives a net change in momentum as these angles are also theta. So normal to the surface, the momentum, it is Pi cos theta, it is Pi sin theta. This is PR cos theta and PR sin theta. So in the direction normal to the surface, the net change in momentum delta P normal to the surface is equal to Pi plus PR cos theta. If I put the values, it comes out to be 1 plus rho I A cos square theta T by C. So normal force on the surface, delta P perpendicular by T, that is 1 plus rho I A cos square theta by C. This is normal force. So pressure is normal force per unit area, that is 1 plus rho I cos square theta by C. This is the pressure when there is oblique incidence. So it is not only cos component, it is cos square theta. For normal incidence we have seen the pressure to be 1 plus rho I by C, but for oblique incidence it is 1 plus rho I cos square theta by C. Sometime instead of pressure, force is also asked, net force is also asked. Here we got perpendicular force perpendicular to the surface. We also have parallel force which acts parallel to the surface. We can write F parallel is equal to, in parallel direction, dP parallel by T. This is equal to 1 minus rho I A cos theta sin theta by C. This is the parallel force. So perpendicular force is 1 plus rho I A cos square theta by C. Parallel force is 1 plus rho I A cos theta sin theta by C, as the parallel force is Pi sin theta minus Pr cos theta. We write plus, as the direction is opposite, so minus sign comes. Net force is under root F perpendicular square plus F parallel square. So if I use the parallel and perpendicular component, Ia cos theta by C is common, that I can take out. It is Ia cos theta by C is common. What is left inside? It is 1 plus rho square cos square theta plus 1 minus rho square sin square theta. If I break open the term, Ia cos theta upon C under root, here from cos square theta plus sin square theta it is 1, here from rho square cos square theta plus rho square sin square theta it is rho square, plus here from we have 2 rho cos square theta minus 2 rho sin square theta. So F is equal to Ia cos theta upon C under root 1 plus rho square plus 2 rho is common, cos square theta minus sin square theta can be written as 2 rho cos 2 theta. This is the net force experienced by the surface when light is falling at some angle, but when light is falling normally, pressure is because of due to normal force only. So for normal force we get pressure, it is 1 plus rho I cos square theta by C, and if force is asked, then this is the force. This is the situation when surface is plane. But what happens in case of spherical surface? For spherical surface, the pressure calculation is quite easy. How it is so? Let us see. For curved surface, if parallel beam of light is incident on it, what happens for that? If we have a spherical surface of radius r, a parallel beam of light of intensity I is falling on it. Now the interesting thing for spherical surface is that even if the light is parallel, the angle of incidence are different for different light rays. I consider a light ray falling at 0 degree and 2 light rays at 45 degree each. The light within 45 degree angle of incidence gets reflected in opposite direction and exert a force in forward direction, whereas the reflected light reflected at angle greater than 45 degree exerts a force in the reverse direction. In such a situation, force due to reflected light, net force due to reflected light is cancelled out. Force due to reflected light is 0, as the light ray striking at angle lesser than 45 degree exerts a force in backward direction, forward direction, and light ray incident at an angle greater than 45 degree exerts a force in backward direction, such that net force due to reflected light becomes 0. So we have force only due to incident light. And for incident light, we have the projected area, normal area. Normal area of spherical surface is pi r square. This is area projected perpendicular to the incident light, and in this situation pressure is equal to I by C, force on the surface, net force on the surface, whatever be the coefficient of reflection, it is equal to I into pi r square by C for any value of rho. So for spherical surface, the net force is I into pi r square by C for any value of coefficient of reflection. This is the case when surface is spherical. So this is the radiation pressure. This is how it works. And now we have matter wave, where we get de Broglie hypothesis. What is matter wave? Here we have de Broglie's hypothesis. What de Broglie said? He said that similar to light, particle also has dual nature. Particle also has dual nature means that particle also has wave nature. Particle already has particle nature, but they also show wave property when they are under motion. So every moving particle shows wave nature. What is that wave nature? How it is related? As we have just seen that momentum of photon from Einstein, we have seen due to dual nature of light, P is equal to h by lambda, that we have seen. De Broglie said that de Broglie wavelength of any moving particle is lambda is equal to h by p. That is, every particle which possesses a momentum will have the de Broglie wavelength, will show wave nature. But as we move, we cannot see a bus wave or train wave or plane wave or human wave. We are moving, but we could not see the wave nature. How de Broglie could say that every moving particle could show the wave nature? The condition to observe wave nature is that the wavelength has to be larger or at least of the order of size of the particle. So wave nature is observed when size of the particle is of the order of wavelength. That is, for smaller particles we can see wave nature. For larger particles we cannot see wave nature if wavelength is not that large, because we could see only the bigger one. So how we can see the wave nature of electron but not wave nature of a person running? Let us first see some numbers. Why we could see wave nature of some particle but not for all particles? That is our limitation, we could not see. You might have heard the name of electron microscope. In electron microscope, instead of light beam, electron beam is used to see the image, to form the image, where electrons behave as wave. Let us see. The question is, a person of mass 50 kg is running with a speed 10 meter per second. His speed is 10 meter per second. Then what will be the de Broglie wavelength of that person? So if I find the de Broglie wavelength of that person, what I get? Lambda is equal to h by p is equal to h by mv. H is 6.63 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule second. Mass is given to be 50 kg, speed is given to be 10 meter per second. So, it is 1.3 into 10 to the power minus 36 meter. This is the de Broglie wavelength associated with a person, whereas size of the person is of the order of meter, 1.6 meter, 1.7 meter. So, in comparison to the size of the person, its de Broglie wavelength is extremely small. So, we cannot see wave nature of a person. But if we think of electron in hydrogen atom, suppose. So, what will be the de Broglie wavelength of electron in ground state of hydrogen atom? What we get? Let us see de Broglie wavelength of electron in ground state of hydrogen atom. H is already known, 6.63 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule second. Mass of electron is 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 kg. In ground state of hydrogen atom, the speed of electron is 2.2 into 10 to the power 6 meter per second. It is 6 c by 137, where c is speed of light. So, this is the speed of electron in ground state of hydrogen atom. If I use this, it is 3 by 9 into 10 to the power minus 34 minus 31, this is minus 3 plus minus 6, this is minus 9 meter or 3.3 angstrom. Whereas, size of electron is of the order of Fermi, that is 10 to the power minus 15 meter, and this is its wavelength. So, wavelength of electron is much larger than size of electron. So, we could see wave nature of electron and not particle nature. That is why you might have heard that electron clouds are present in atom, because there they show wave behavior and not particle behavior. So, to find the de Broglie wavelength of various particles, what we need to find? We need to find the momentum. In various situations, we could find the momentum. Suppose if a particle of mass m moving with velocity v, then its momentum p is equal to mv, that is the simplest one. If some particle is moving with some kinetic energy, then momentum p is equal to under root 2 mk, that is the momentum when kinetic energy is key. If some particle, some charged particle is accelerated through some potential difference to gain kinetic energy, for those particles p is equal to under root 2mk, as we said earlier, it is equal to q into v, so that is the momentum. If any charged particle is moving in magnetic field in circular orbits, we know in magnetic field circular orbits radius is mv by qb, so mv is rqb. In that situation, the de Broglie wavelength, or here mv p is equal to, we can write rqb if charged particle is moving in magnetic field in circular orbit. If we have some particle moving due to temperature, some neutral particle, for neutral particles kinetic energy is equal to 3 by 2 kT, where small k is Boltzmann constant. In that situation, momentum is equal to under root 2m, this k can be written as 3 by 2 kT, where small k is Boltzmann constant, or it is equal to 3 mkt, the temperature is measured in absolute unit. So, there are various situations of finding momentum of particle, and accordingly we can have their de Broglie wavelength. Let us see one question, how we could find the de Broglie wavelength. two particles, a proton and an alpha particle, are moving in uniform magnetic field with same kinetic energy. Their kinetic energy, that is Kp and K alpha, are equal. Then find the ratio of their de Broglie wavelength. So, proton and alpha particles are moving with same kinetic energy in a magnetic field. They are moving in a circular orbit. Then find the ratio of their de Broglie wavelength. So, here from we can have lambda p by lambda alpha is equal to momentum of alpha particle by momentum of proton, that is equal to under root 2 m alpha k alpha by under root 2 mp kp. Kp and k alpha are equal. So, here from we can write under root m alpha by mp. Mass of alpha particle is 4 times the mass of proton. So, here from we can write 4 mp upon mp, that is equal to 2. So, lambda p is to lambda alpha is 2:1. That is the ratio of their de Broglie wavelength.